Ready? Welcome to downtown Grand Forks. It's time and place for the Grand Forks Job Development Authority meeting. It's Monday, June 5th at 5:30 p.m. Item 1 is roll call. Mic check. Test 1, 2. Nothing.
I'll do roll call. Weigel.
Here.
Wazowski. Here. Weber.
Here.
Lunsky. Here. Connie.
Here.
Sammy. King.
Here.
Mayor Wojcicki.
Here.
We have a quorum. Okay, number 2.1 career interview. That's right. 2.1 career impact academy land transfer and project update.
Ms. Richards.
Thank you. Just want to preamble by noting that Growth Fund Committee just met prior to this meeting from 4 to 5. So none of your staff reports will have a recommendation on them, but I will present those as we go. In terms of this item, City Council at the Committee of the Whole on May 22nd heard a presentation and a similar request to what Growth Fund Committee just heard regarding the transfer of property to the school district. Eric Ripley from the school district is here for questions. I won't ask him to go through his presentation for the second time for some of you, but the request today for the JDA is to authorize the transfer of the property that is described in your staff report in terms of a legal description, but the actual property is the former Grand Forks Inn and Suites property on Gateway between 42nd and 43rd and the adjoining, I believe it was a car lot. As you know, this was part of the local match to the $10 million grant that was offered through the state and that they that we were successful enough to receive. The agreement by the Growth Fund to acquire the property and demolish the old motel and abate it was done with the idea that the property would be transferred only if the project would proceed. That does appear very likely, so we're asking for kind of the last step in that process and for your authorization to actually transfer ownership of that property by a quitclaim deed, subject of course to city attorney review and approval.
Thank you, Ms. Richards. We'll open the public hearing on item 2.1. Anybody wishing to speak on item 2.1? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing on 2.1. We have a motion to approve by Osowski.
I'll second it.
Second by Wojcicki. Any further comment by the committee? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 2.2.
Childcare flex case request. Elway.
Ms. Richards.
Again, the recommendation out of committee was to approve. This is a request for a flex space loan to support the expansion of childcare in our community, which we all know is a crucial need. The folks at Elway, the principals are Dean. I'm sorry. Okay, back to where I started. The principals and owner of this business are D. Decimus Homes, and they have received a substantial grant through the state RWIP program. Again, this is a workforce issue, and as part of the Growth Fund's assistance in this, we're offering them a flex-paced loan. As your staff report says, the JDA loan would be just shy of $15,000. That would leverage a grant from the Bank of North Dakota for approximately $28,000. And again, the purpose of this loan is to buy down the interest rate on a commercial loan that is helping them with the renovation of the facility. Recommendation out of Growth Fund Committee earlier today was to approve.
Thank you, Ms. Richards. We'll open a public hearing on item 2.2. Is there anybody that wishes to speak on item 2.2? We'll close the public hearing, leave it to the committee. Motion by Osowski, second by Kavami. Any further comment? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 2.3.
Air autonomy thread highways.
As some of you may know, Air Autonomy, who's now doing business as Thread, was one of our first tenants in the second floor of this building in terms of its use as a tech accelerator. They were on a month-to-month lease, which was attached to your staff report since that was executed in January of 2021. With the EDA funded renovation of this facility, we were required to get EDA approval of any lease or membership agreements before executing any leases with spaces that were renovated with those funds. And we now have that approval from EDA. So we're looking to update the lease on their existing space in the southeast corner of the building, as well as get the space that they requested that was fit up using EDA funds officially recorded into a lease. The third page of your staff report kind of summarizes the terms. Currently, they're paying approximately $1,900 a month for the space that they're in. That is at $16 a square foot and includes a $200 a month internet fee. And that loan has, or excuse me, that lease has been on a month-to-month basis. The recommendation, and this is kind of mutually agreed to by staff and the folks at Thread, was to maintain that lease pretty much as it is, with some tweaking in that the internet fee will be removed from the lease, and that will be covered in a membership fee that I'll talk about in a bit. And the cost per square foot stays the same at $16, but the square footage goes up slightly to reflect a closet that they use exclusively and has been incorporated into the lease. That puts their rent at $19.50 a month, so very little change on that. For the new space, that's approximately 2,100 square feet. The terms of our lease template with EDA state that we will offer these spaces that were fit up using EDA funds at market rent. Market rent we're currently saying is $20 a square foot, but EDA gives the option of attaching an addendum to a lease to allow us to either discount or in theory attach a premium to that price. In this case, the recommendation is to offer a 50% discount or offer that space at $10 a square foot, which is reflective of both Thread status as a startup and our desire through this tech accelerator to assist them in acquiring full-blown successful company status. And excuse me. And also recognizes that they will provide mentoring services to other tenants or members of the tech accelerator, sharing their experience, which has been quite successful so far. And so on that basis, staff and Thread have agreed to a 50% discount rate. And then finally, the last piece of the revenue picture is a membership fee. This is based on $150 a month per head. The way this building is laid out, we have a lot of amenities in rooms such as the classrooms and health spaces, but very little rentable space. So charging a membership fee is meant to help with the cash flow, and basically it's looked at as a user fee. And so with an estimate of 10 on-site full-time employees, that would be $1,500 a month in membership fees, which would bring their total monthly cost from $1,924 a month to $5,171 a month. When this was discussed at Growth Fund Committee, there was some concern about the term. The existing lease is on a month-to-month basis. The new lease, which again is subject to EDA terms, has a limit on the amount of time. The recommendation was that they would have a 24-month term, able to be renewed up to a maximum of 36 months total or an additional 12 months. And Thread had requested the ability to opt out after 12 months as long as they gave a 90-day notice. at Growth Fund Committee just an hour or so ago, the recommendation was to swap out the 24-month term for an 18-month term with the opportunity for one 18-month renewal, so it would still be that 36-month maximum, and to retain the 12-month opt-out provision, but basically shortening their term, shortening their initial term, but giving them the option of the full 36 months. Again, the request is to approve those terms with an effective date of June 1, and I'm certainly happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Richards. We'll open the public hearing on item 2.3. Is there anybody here that wishes to speak on item 2.3? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing on item 2.3. Committee comments? Mr.
Yeah.
Jaczynski.
I would just say if you take in their user fee and you, the entire space, so it's 3,529 square feet. At 5171, that's 62,052 a year. So you're really looking at about $17.58 per square foot, that kind of all-in price, and they're mentored, tenants are offering other services. So I think that's in line with what we're trying to get, if not, better. So I think it's a pretty reasonable term for both sides, and like 18 months, and you can revisit it there. They can opt in or opt out at that point, but they've been good already as far as working with companies that are coming here and bringing more companies in. So I'll motion to approve.
Give a motion by Mayor Jaczynski. Is there a second? Second by Lunsky. Further comment? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 2.4,
Signatory authorization.
Ms. Richards.
The last item obviously was for lease approval, and we talked about the membership agreement that is on an individual basis. Since we anticipate a lot of turnover with those and a high volume of those, the request is to authorize city staff to execute those on behalf of the JDA rather than bringing each individual membership fee through Growth Fund Committee and the JDA. The dollar amount is relatively low, and they are on a month-to-month basis, and so I just think logistically it would be pretty cumbersome to have that go through a formal two-step approval process. Leases will continue to come before this group as always, given that they're of a higher value and longer duration. Again, the recommendation out of Growth Fund Committee was to approve.
Ms. Richards. I'll open up the public hearing on item 2.4. Anybody that wishes to speak to item 2.4? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Committee comments?
Move approval.
Moved by Kavami, second by Osowski. Seeing no further comments, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Item 2.5.
Mobile recon past due law.
Mobile recon has been before both Growth Fund Committee and JDA a couple of times in the past. They have become severely past due, and while they have come forward with some workout plans, which are attached to your staff report, we have just been basically unable to get in touch with them in any way for about the last 30 days. When this was brought to Growth Fund Committee in April, staff's recommendation was to, if they weren't caught up or had a viable plan by June 1st, to pursue action through the city attorney's office to collect some of our funds. The recommendation at the April meeting was to just kind of sit tight until June and see what happened, given that we have been able to have any sort of contact whatsoever out of them. The recommendation of the Growth Fund Committee was to begin working with the city attorney to follow the terms of the note and proceed to collection.
Thank you, Ms. Richards. I'll open the public hearing on item 2.5. Anybody like to speak to 2.5, please come forward. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Committee comments? Moved by Osowski. Second by Kavami. Seeing no further comments, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Osowski, second by Ochensky. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The side, motion carries unanimously.
All right, moving right along, we will start the Grand Forks City Council meeting. Welcome and roll call, please, Marie.
Weigel,
Here.
Osowski. Here. Weiler.
Here.
Muncy.
Here.
Klein.
Here.
Sandy.
Here.
And Dean.
Here.
We have four.
Thank you. Item 1.2, Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, item 1.3, mayor's announcements. Pretty exciting. We had a really great announcement today. We got word that we're going to receive not only a $30 million grant from Reconnecting America grant, but also $7.5 million from a federal highway. So a total of $37.5 million in federal grants to help all the underpass at Demers and 42nd. Project that's been talked about and looked at for 32 years. And that grant today cements the fact that that project is going to get done. I'd expect in the next 6 weeks, we're going to have to look at what our proposed favoring alternatives and our proposed options going to be as a policy board. But we would have environmental probably done by the end of the year, planning and design through 2024 and a completion date in 26 or 27. So this project is real and it's going to happen. So just want to thank the city council for the work they've done to make this a priority because it's taken a long time and now it's going to get done. So thank you guys. On the 23rd of May, we were out at Grand Sky along with Senator Hogan and True Weather. They had the opening of the Weather Center grand opening. So they got a really neat feature that's going to allow what they call micro weather reports and get as accurate as possible weather here in Grand Forks to allow for more flights at both UAS large and small out there at Grand Sky. So pretty exciting. Again, putting Grand Forks on the map nationally in such a positive way. We finished spring cleanup week. I know it was a little bit of a challenge switching from garbage day over to street ordinance, street cleaning day, but the crews got through. They did some cleanup last week to pick on a few of the spots, and I was happy to get out there with the crew on Friday and do some cleanup as well. So definitely positive. People are pretty happy enjoying those services. Finally. On a much more sad note, we want to give our condolences to the family of retired Deputy Chief of Police Mike Kirby. Mike was with the city for over 32 years. He originally served in the Air Force, both as an active and reserve duty capacity, retiring after 29 years as a Chief Master Sergeant. He began his career with Grand Forks Police Department in 1982 as a police officer. In 96, he was promoted to sergeant, and then lieutenant in 1999, and captain in June of 2001. He also served as the interim police chief from February 2014 to December 2014. With over those 32 years, he retired in May of 2015. And unfortunately, Mike passed away on May 29th after a short battle with leukemia. And what could be seen as probably the highest honor possible, he's going to be interred at with military honors at Fort Snelling in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in a private family ceremony. So keep him and his family in your thoughts and prayers. All right, we'll move on to 2 citizen comments.
Okay, we have 3 comments tonight. Jason Patrick.
Mr. Patrick, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council, my fellow citizens, and other concerned parties. Firstly, congrats on the grant. It's good work and it's important, relevant work. So good. Glad to see you guys doing that. Now on to business. Having read over the document labeled Citizen Comment Policy Revised or Revision, whatever REV is abbreviation for, I am for the most part satisfied with its contents. I do, however, take issue with 3 points. The first of which is paragraph 1.2 regarding who may be allowed to speak. This paragraph is purely retaliatory and self-serving, no matter how you try to spin it, as evidenced by the recurring allusions to various persons from outside the immediate community. Sean DeClaire and persons from Ohio have been a recurring theme among some of you, and I will remind you, remember, ladies and gentlemen, if it had not been for our persons from Ohio, who, by the way, spent his own money and his own time to come before this city council to try and warn you and educate you on the dangers of what you were pursuing, reaching out to members of the federal government on certain matters, and aided significantly in thwarting an adversarial nation from gaining further foothold in our country right next to an airbase with one of the most critical and sensitive missions, and the nature of those missions will only increase in importance and sensitivity. Your actions, your pursuits, as well as the efforts of the EDC, who had prior knowledge of the company's origins, and this body's willingness to maintain a level of willful ignorance placed national security in jeopardy, the actions of Ross Kennedy and the citizens who stood in lockstep against your actions, one of which was the person who reached out to Ross Kennedy, initially thwarted the enemy from establishing yet another toehold here, not the development agreement. I would think harder on your desire to prevent people from outside our immediate community from speaking, especially when they are subject matter experts in their respective fields. To do so is purely cowardice on your part and makes a mockery of certain members' repetition of having the freest citizen comments in the state. The second is the inclusion of the aforementioned paragraphs concept in subparagraph A of paragraph 2.1. Again, as paragraph 1.2, this is retaliatory and self-serving and wholly useless in its inclusion in said paragraph. The third point with which I have issue with the lack of clear and defined inclusion of yourselves, or rather your offices or positions, in the standards of conduct for council meetings. This smacks of an air of entitlement and being above your constituency, of which you are not. And in bearing the mantle of public service through leadership, you should be prepared to answer for your missteps with a greater level of punishment, because you are supposed to be the example. You are supposed to set the standard. Lastly, 2 final comments on a separate but not unrelated topic. On the after-action review of Project Peony, 2 things. Mr. Mayor, you asked Mr. Veen to take lead on conducting said review and you asked Mr. Veen to take the lead on conducting said review and should support his every attempt to place the matter on the agenda. I fully expect you to vocally and publicly support him in those efforts. To do anything less than that is a gross failure of leadership and a betrayal of the implications made by you to the public when you requested Mr. Veen take that lead. Be the leader you should. Mr. Veen, hoist the proverbial black flag of no quarter and don't let them hold you or your efforts down or silence your voice. And Mr. Sandy, contrary to your personal belief, standing before this podium and taking this body to task by the majority of those who do so is not about the theatrics of it, but rather the accountability of it. It places the grievances in the public forum and in public record, which cannot legally be erased and cannot be so easily dismissed as conversations had on a phone call can be. Your desire to not go through the rehashing of the development agreement because you lived through it is irrelevant and became irrelevant the moment you raised your right hand and took office. And this applies to all in elected offices. When you took that oath and gave yourself over to something bigger than yourself. If you are not prepared to live up to that sort of concept in all matters, then I recommend you step aside and allow someone else who is willing to do so step up. I thank you. Hope you have a lovely evening.
Thank you, Mr. Patrick.
Alice Spicer.
Ms. Spicer, please.
Good evening. I'm also here to speak about the citizens' comments policy. On May 8th, a committee of the whole meeting was held to discuss the citizens' comments policy. I heard questions and comments from Brett Weber, including what is a legitimate citizen comment? Who should be allowed to speak at these meetings? These are our meetings, not a democratic free-for-all. We have no obligation for citizens' comments. And there has been a lot of Jerry Springer type conduct. When I think about what you said, it seems that your statements have a very authoritarian and controlling context to them. And I believe you started the Jerry Springer type conduct by trying to bring an adversary to our community. I also heard Dana Sandy say he has been hearing from the town that the rhetoric is unnecessary. What Dana forgot to mention was the behavior that his wife Megan displayed during one city council meeting. My mother and I had gotten up to leave after this particular meeting, or during the meeting. My mother went outside to text my brother, who was very sick. I went out to use the bathroom. This meeting had been held upstairs. While my mother was texting my brother, Megan, whom I had no idea who she was at the time, started screaming at my mother to put her effing phone away. At first, we had no idea who she was yelling at. My mother finally realized it was her and said, "I'm not filming you, I'm texting my son." After I thought she had left, I went downstairs to use the restroom, and when I got to the landing, I saw her and Dana standing there. Megan was telling him that he needs to control these people. I continued on the stairs, walking around them when Megan turned and screamed at me that all of you people are effing crazy. I turned around and said, "Excuse me?" Dana then whispered under his breath, "It's okay, honey. She didn't take her meds today." Then Chief Nelson walked down to the landing and just stood there. I asked him if he was going to do anything. His response to me was, "I've been getting called names all night long. What do you expect me to do?" Chief Nelson, how about you do your job for one time? I continued to walk away, and Dana's wife continued to go closer to my face and closer to my face and screaming. So you can talk about our behavior all you want.
So Mayor Buczynski, I'm sorry, but
don't even, Dana.
I can't, Ms. Spicer is completely lying.
I requested the video and I was denied these videos.
This is good. We'll get the videos because this is nonsense. And I'm tired of you talking about my wife that way.
Your wife's that way. What about what your wife did to me? I was walking.
My wife was not, my wife didn't even, you came at her. My wife did not raise her voice at all. And when we look at that video, all people will see is you being aggressive coming at my wife. If that's what you want public, that's no problem by me.
Get the video.
Let's continue.
Okay.
Let's
So
let it
moving
finish and we
on.
can sort it
Okay.
later. I think we got to conduct city business here now, please.
Yes. So speaking of intimidation strategies, I think the public should know that Chief Nelson also contacted the Bureau of Criminal Investigations to reach out to my father to do a voluntary interview. Let it be known that my father was not being charged with anything. Just like when Chief Nelson sent the FBI to Jody Carlson's for posting part of the Declaration of Independence online. Chief Nelson, I feel like this might be abusing your power just a little bit. I've always wondered why 9 police officers quit at about the same time. So Danny, you met with these business owners twice. You lied to them. You said you were going to work them out a deal or maybe not be annexed at all. You wonder why people are mad and they act this way. You've taken away our right to vote. You've offered people these things and then you've taken it away from them and you've charged them ridiculous amounts of taxes. Have a good evening. You too, Dana.
Thank you, Ms. Spicer.
John Berkey? Sorry, if I got your last name wrong.
It rhymes with turkey.
Okay.
It's not beyond the notice of my 3rd grade classmates.
Mr. Gorky, please.
So I've got a positive comment here, but I have to briefly just mention some of the previous stuff about the citizen comments. I don't necessarily know what the proper ruling is for quality comments in the community, out of the community, etc. But I do have to just wonder about the value added to the committee meetings by certain citizen comments. I don't know if there's a lot of value added by an attempted citizen's arrest of the mayor I don't know that there's a lot of value added to that same individual looking at each of you in the eye and asking if you're under duress. I don't know if there's a lot of value added at the volume that has been exuded from this podium. I don't know if there's a lot of value added having a Cargill associate come and speak against a competitor without divulging that he was a Cargill associate. So I don't know what the answer is. You guys have a very tough road ahead figuring out how to moderate citizen comments, but I will note one thing. The rhetoric we've heard about, oh, you've pushed us to this, you have been aggressive from the bench. It's interesting that the times when this council has either called to order or perhaps pushed back on certain points, that's been considered totally out of line by certain members of the community behind me. But graphic descriptions of rape, outright accusations of treason, attempting to insult members of people's families, including Mr. Sandy's wife. These things are apparently totally fair game. And I would simply note from one citizen's perspective that if the people behind me were sitting where you are, they would not be able to take the level of abuse that they themselves dish out. Now I want to talk about something cool, the library. I thought it would be nice for all of you to hear from one lowly dad of 4 kids that the library renovation of the children's department is phenomenal. My wife came home after taking our 4 kids to it, and she noted she was crying. She said, it's beautiful, the lighting is great, the kids are excited, they were playing in the treehouse, they were going to get their books. My kids probably go to the library about 3 or 4 times per week. So the fact that this space, which pretty much represents for them a major part of the city, the fact that this space was paid attention to and invested in and overall taken care of is something I really, really deeply appreciate personally. I don't know exactly how the power structures work or what the structure of the Grand Forks City is that leads from all of you down to the people who actually made those decisions, but please pass on to your channels what a phenomenal job was done. To that note, I would simply encourage all of you in the months ahead with future projects and considerations to note what made the library, at least in my mind, such a huge success. It's an indoor space, which gives children a place to play, especially in the long winter months. We realized on my youngest daughter's 6-month birthday that she literally hadn't seen green grass. She was born November 5th. We got our first snow cover on November 6th. And 6 months later, there was still snow on the ground. So when you're looking at things like the Children's Museum, which also has the potential to be a very exciting space for kids, I'm personally a little concerned about the amount of outdoor features that may be of limited use. It's cool, I get it, being outdoors is great. We've been at the splash park every day this week. That's why I'm a little bit sunburned. It's not that it's hot in here, I'm just toasty. But outdoor spaces are of limited value in this community. I recall fondly a story from when I was growing up. AMC did a big remodel in Rosedale. They hired a Florida-based architect. The architect designed the ticket queue to be outdoors, which in Florida would be totally reasonable. But come Christmas, AMC was wondering why their big movie season wasn't getting a lot of patrons, because no one wanted to stand in 20 below weather to buy their tickets. So that's my ask. Please consider more indoor spaces, especially as it concerns the Children's Museum and also potentially the Career Impact Academy, which I know is on the menu for tonight. But mostly just to say, I think you're all doing a nice job. The library is an example of it. The grant is an example of it. And a few weeks ago, with my last 30 seconds here, there was a lady who got up here and said that the vast majority of citizens think you're doing a good job. I've been checking with people at barbecues or whatnot. My friend Adrian lives over there. He's renovating his house right now. My friend Paul's trying to run an ice cream shop. My friend Maggie is at home with her husband right now, who is also a police officer. And just from that admittedly small and unrepresentative sampling, most of them think you're doing a great job, and that a lot of the vitriol that's been directed at you is entirely unjustified. With that, have a great night. I'm gonna go home to my kids.
Thank you, Mr. Gorky.
I will just point out too, there is an email that's also attached relating to item 5.8.
All right, we'll move on to item 3, awards, presentations, appointments, and proclamations.
3.1 regional transportation projects update to raise the 42nd, grade separation, 32nd annual cell and I-29
Before you start, Mr. Clerk, we gotta say you look good with the suit on, and you had to show off today, and this was a big piece of his work, and obviously engineering department's work to get that grant today. So just want to give you, my personal thanks, and you look sharp tonight.
Thank you, Mayor Berczynski, and members of the council. So before you tonight, I've got just an update on some of our more regional projects. Going to be going over tonight the 42nd Street grade separation, where we're at on the I-29 interchange, as well as an update on the 32nd Avenue rehabilitation project. So some background on the 42nd Street grade separation. As Mayor Berczynski mentioned before, this project is 32 years, give or take, in the making. When in 1991, we ended up having our grade separation feasibility study. In 1994, City Council ended up taking action in order to get this project moving along, and ended up purchasing property in the southwest quadrant. I'll get to some of those details later on, but this was some great foresight by the City Council at the time, and it's proving invaluable today. 1999, we ended up updating our project concept report, which is what we now know today as our environmental document. A number of years passed, the environmental document got stale, so in 2006, that project concept report was once again updated, trying to continue this project going forward. In 2012, kind of a similar deal where we updated our environmental document, and with the changing times, we ended up selecting a preferred alternative. And then in 2014, that categorical exclusion was completed. With that categorical exclusion completed in 2015, we ended up applying for a Tiger grant to get this project constructed. Unfortunately, we were not awarded grant funding for this project. Most recently here in 2021, we ended up hiring KLJ to once again update the environmental document, and I'll be getting to that where we're at on that currently in a bit. But as Mayor Berczynski mentioned earlier this evening, today we were officially notified that we were awarded a significant amount of federal funding to continue moving this project forward. In looking at this area over 20 years ago, even when they were looking at this project 10 years before this is one of the earlier aerial images we have available. You can end up seeing that this intersection is relatively undeveloped. You have UND developed to the northeast. We don't have all of the buildings that UND currently has built out in the northwest corner. In the southwest corner, you don't have a whole lot of development besides the gas station. It's mostly open field. And southeast quadrant, you end up having Ray Ridge's golf course. 2006, you can end up seeing UND ended up developing the buildings more in that northwest quadrant. Still very little development in that southwest quadrant. No real development extending in the northeast quadrant. Once again, continuation, not a whole lot of changes here, except for the northwest quadrant. This is 2012. So you can see as we're slowly developing this area, and then as we get into 2021, there's that housing development, multifamily housing that developed on the southwest quadrant, as well as south of Ray Richards Golf Course there. And with that in mind, the purchase that was made in the mid-90s, you can see those two parcels, those two vacant lots in that southwest quadrant, that when this project was still being considered very early on in this area, it was very undeveloped. City Council ended up taking action in order to secure the property that we needed to make this project a reality today. Now, what do we have in store for the future for our 42nd Street grade separation? The mayor ended up mentioning that coming up here in July, possibly August, we're going to be bringing an item forward to City Council to discuss the 5 alternatives that we are currently looking at, and then also to select a preferred alternative to move forward with. In September, we're hoping to have the environmental document completed and approved. And based on the timelines and the grant application that was submitted last fall, we are anticipating that February 2025 is when we have right-of-way acquisition complete, as well as our final design and bid package ready to go. In April of 2025 is when we would be anticipating a bid opening, and then in June of 2025 would be the start of construction. Now, with the size of the project that this would likely take 2 solid years to construct, which is why we'd be looking at an anticipated completion date of the construction in 2027. With the grant that we have, we will be looking at having a end of grant or anticipated project end date where we could have the last day to incur costs as being November 2029. Now, moving on to some of the cost breakdowns that we currently have for this project. These were tables taken from the grant application that was submitted this past fall. You see at the very top there, the $30 million, which was part of this grant application and awarded this afternoon, as well as 2 lines down, the $7.5 million of additional federal funding through the DOT. Through this, you're also looking at an additional $4.2 million in state funds, $1.5 million from BNSF Railway, and then the city share being approximately $16.8 million. Cost breakdowns more into their respective work components. You can see below where the construction and construction engineering is approximately $34.4 million. The land purchase, utility relocations, and environmental mitigations, including golf course mitigation, approximately $19.2 million. And then our design and engineering costs for the front end of the project being approximately $6.4 million. So overall project, we're anticipating about $60 million in cost. Now, in looking at this project and how far we've come and the steps that we need to take moving forward, one of the things we do want to put forward is a giant thank you for the US DOT, the North Dakota Department of Transportation, BNSF Railway, UND, the Grand Forks East Grand Forks MPO, the Chamber, and the greater Grand Forks community as a whole. Without everybody's support, this project would not be possible. And hopefully, we'll be getting shovels in the ground here before too long, and everybody will be enjoying fewer railroad occupations of that intersection. Now, moving on to our next project, 47th Avenue interchange. This is a project, it's a little bit younger than the 42nd Street underpass, but in 2014, we were still working on this project. We saw it as a need, and we ended up submitting an interchange access request back in 14. Also in 2014, the MPO ended up including this interchange as part of their long-range transportation plan. So this has been a project that's been 9 years in the making, probably longer if you end up looking back in further MPO long-range transportation plans. Now, in 2017, one of the things the MPO did was they ended up doing an I-29 traffic operations study, which looked at all of the interchanges we have along I-29, how the level of service was for traffic, and also looking at future conditions and concerns that there would be. And one of the things that they identified was concerns at 32nd Avenue, where the best way to solve that, the issues at 32nd Avenue would be a new interchange just south. This was reaffirmed when in 2018, the DOT ended up completing a traffic operations report for that 32nd Avenue South left turn lane realignment project. There was a number of level of service issues that were identified for the future along this corridor, which backed up the information that was identified in that MPO study. And in 2021, the DOT ended up hiring Voltec to prepare the environmental document to move this interchange further along. Now, we end up getting to kind of next steps. 47th Avenue interchange, it's on a similar path on this environmental document as to our 42nd Street underpass. And it's likely that we're going to be bringing a set of alternatives to City Council this summer for consideration and selection of preferred alternative. It's also anticipated that that same environmental document is going to be completed and hopefully approved in 2023, and that would also include an IJR, an interchange justification request. Right now, the alternatives of this interchange range from approximately $52 million to $79 million. So there's a number of different alternatives, whether it's on alignment or off alignment, what the ramps look like, the configurations. And then the other piece that is very important to this is our connecting roadways. This would include 47th Avenue, connecting to Columbia Road, and then to the west of the interstate, we will be looking at 47th Avenue, connecting to South 48th Street, and then connecting South 48th Street between 32nd Avenue and 47th Avenue South. Biggest thing we need on this one is similar to what we saw today for the 42nd Street underpass, be securing funding for this interchange. So it's probably going to be a few more years out yet. Moving on to the 32nd Avenue rehabilitation. Right now, this project, it's advertised for bids, and the estimated cost, or engineer's estimate for this project is approximately $1.3 million. In looking at the original project, originally the project was supposed to be a rehabilitation project which went from the I-29 ramps all the way over to South Washington Street. Bids were opened on that one on May 12th. We only had one bidder. That bidder came in at about $4.4 million, 173% over the engineer's estimate. City Council concurred with the awarding of the bid because of the need to have this project completed. Ultimately, the DOT ended up rejecting the bids for this on May 22nd. In response to this and the needs that we have for the asphalt portion of this roadway, the DOT ended up putting together a new set of plans that focused on the asphalt mill and overlay portions of it, as well as the ADA ramps to abide by federal regulations. This project also includes some minor the curb ramp repairs, as well as curb and gutter repairs. The concrete portion of this is still planned to be completed, but it is looking at a fall bid opening for construction in 2024. As I mentioned earlier, project estimate for this asphalt mill and overlay is approximately $1.3 million. City share on this is approximately 10%, or about $130,000. This project is scheduled to have a bid opening on June 23rd. Anticipating bringing this to the June 29th Committee of the Whole and the July 5th City Council, hopefully with a staff recommendation to concur with the award. And then there will be a 2023 completion date on this. In front of you, I've got just a very brief summary of each of these three projects. There's a lot of good projects happening. And in addition to this, one other piece of information that was brought to light on Friday was we were also notified that the Highway Safety Improvement Project, which we applied for this past fall, which included realignment of the intersection of Gateway Drive and North Columbia Road, was realigning the left turn lanes, getting those in line similar to what we have on 32nd Avenue now, as well as a number of other safety measures, including providing more visibility to pedestrians in the northeast corner and getting the traffic signal poles out of the clear zone so they're less likely to get hit by an errant vehicle. So we were notified that we received funding for that project on Friday, HSIP program, Highway Safety Improvement Program. That is a 90% federal, 10% local match. So that is another good bit of news for the city. And with that, thank you, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
All right, thank you for the thorough presentation, and obviously keep in mind there's a lot of other road projects going on, so this is some future looking things, but thank you for all the work you're doing currently. Any questions for Mr. Karenko? All right, thank you.
3.2 then is an MPO update presentation.
All right, Ms. Halford, you got a tough act to follow.
I was just about to say that, I'm like, I can't follow that act.
I do have a presentation, I hope. All right, you can just skip to the next one. All right, really the purpose of me coming here is just kind of to give an overview of what that PO is over the past year. I've already been in this role for a year. There's been questions that have come up that I just want to come forward, just make myself available to answer any questions that you might have, what we do, what we are, and just kind of make that clear so we can move forward, because we have a lot of things coming up. So basically the MPO started conversations in 1964. Congress was looking at transportation planning processes, looking at what they're calling the 3 C's, comprehensive, cooperative, and continuing. So basically in 1973, they created what is called the MPO to house that, where communities can kind of reach out and bring decision-making process in fruition. So the 3 C's, continuing, so we are always looking at past, evaluating what we can do to make the future better. And then cooperative is basically bringing everyone together. That's a huge part of what we are, is just bring everybody part of the conversation. And comprehensive, looking at modes of travel to study how they work together. We're not only looking at one mode, but we're looking at transit, bus, walking, biking, and street and highway. Next slide. So, I guess really to come forward is I want you guys to think more of us as a special tool in the toolbox. We're an extension of your staff. We're not here to give you any extra hoops. I hope we're be used a little bit more often than we have been in the past. Here to help you with making those tough decisions that you have to be faced with sometimes, with information and data that we can provide. So we're not the only MPO in the state of North Dakota. Recently, Minot has been designated as a up-and-coming MPO. They're still working out the logistics. So we'll soon be a 4 MPO state. We're also a bi-state MPO, so we also have representation, of course, on East Grand Forks, and there's a lot more bigger MPOs on the Minnesota side. So as an MPO, we're required to do some planning activities. There's the Unified Work Program. We've been doing it by 2-year increments. So right now we're in the 23-24. This kind of supports the 3 C's that we talked about before. There's also the Transportation Improvement Program. So what Dave was going over before, those projects go into a list, and then we set it up to the DOT and the state, and they put it in their STIP. So they have a list of projects. They know what the locals are doing. It's, again, that kind of funneling and working together process and putting it up to the state level. We also do what's called the MTP, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, or the Long Range Transportation Plan. This is the street and highway. This is the bus, the bike and ped, and the transit plan. That's all wrapped into one. Usually we do it in pieces. Right now we're finishing up the bike and ped, and we're halfway through the street and highway. You'll see at the end of the year. We're also, again, hitting on that public participation plan. We also have a plan for that. That's reaching out to the community and key people to kind of come all together, and the environmental justice of it. So what's been going on this past year? A lot's been going on. So like, again, what I said, the bike and ped plan is finishing up. You'll see that in the up and coming couple weeks for approval. Then you'll see the street and highway closer to the end of the year. Then in the next couple weeks, you'll see an update on that, as well as some public meetings. The transit plan was adopted at the beginning of the year. And of course, the fun discussion of the bridge. This is something we've been part of this discussion since the 70s. But this, the most recent study is not something we're leading, but we're part of the conversation. It was probably about 2 weeks into my position. We got notified that you're getting a Title VI audit. I don't know if that's kind of luck of the draw or lucky, but that went smoothly, but just some of the things that were going on. We also did a facelift on our work program, the 23-24. So the new things that you see in there and things that we're wanting to work on. This is our MPO structure. It's called the Technical Advisory Committee, or TAC. This is something that I want to keep touching on, that when we're looking at the data and information, this is not just coming from the MPO, but these are coming from all our stakeholders, the community, working together and kind of coming together on what makes sense for our community. So that the list of people are listed right there currently. This is, and then there's the Executive Policy Board. So it's leadership on both sides of the river. You'll see council representation on both sides as well as county. So not only when we've been updating these plans, we've been also listening and looking and asking ourselves the question of why have we been doing it this way? Does this make sense? Not only, more importantly, not for just us, but for our partners. Are these plans working for you? Are they giving the information that you guys need to help make those tough decisions? And also kind of looking at our policies, procedures. We're also remodeling our office, so we have the same footprint, but we're redoing it so we can fit another person in there and provide more service for you guys. So just putting the question out there, what do you need and want from your MPO? There's some things that we've been doing constantly for the last few years, but what can we do differently? What's missing, what studies, and that's kind of why we're expanding our staff, so we can offer and help more of that. So not only we've been doing a bunch of studies, but we've been also kind of doing things outside the box that we've never done before. We did a joint application with the Fargo MPO and NDSU on the SMART grant for I-29 from the Canadian border to South Dakota. Just looking at more smart technology along there. Unfortunately, we did not get that. We are working with NDSU on, UND about a joint partnership for internship. We've done that in the past and we're continuing to do that. We also put a grant in for Safe Streets for All. That was joint application with both cities. Unfortunately, we have got that grant. That's for a safety action plan for the community as a whole. So that was another first two is kind of coming as entities together to application. So I just open up to any questions. I kind of made a brief. I don't want to take up too much time, but just kind of give you a reminder that we're here. We're just an extension of city staff and we're here to help.
Great. Any questions for Ms. Halford? You took over for Earl Howland, right?
I did.
That's correct. It's already been a year.
What's that?
Has it already been a year?
It has, just over a year.
All right. We've already got more presentations from you than we did the entire time he was there. So.
I hope that's good.
All right.
Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Bean, please.
Thank you for the, I just want to say thank you to Ms. Holford for the work that she's done in the last year. She's done a really great job of trying to step up and take the reins and move into the position. So I think we're all fortunate to have her and thankful for the work she's done. So I'd like to recognize her.
Thank you, Ken.
All right. Any more thank yous or questions? All right. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right. That'll do it for item 3. Move on to item 4, public hearings and second reading of ordinances.
4.1, public hearing and second reading of ordinance to update C code sections related to building codes, international building and international residential codes, international fire codes, and international chemical codes, and international food testing.
All right, thank you. That was quite the mouthful. Anybody who opened the public hearing now for item 4.1? Anybody here to speak on item 4.1, please step up. All right, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing portion. I think we had a pretty good presentation right from Mr. Baseluke. So any further comment or
Move approval.
motion to approve from Mr. Lytle, second from Mr. Kabami. Any further comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously.
4.2, determination of protest on petition to vacate easements of right of way within lot CBE Block 6, Sunset Acres, 3rd edition. Water main easement within lot 1, Block 1, Airport 4-3 subdivision, as well as utility easement within lot 1, Block 1.
All right, do we need a public hearing on this one as well? So we'll open the public hearing on item 4.2. Anybody here to speak on 4.2? All right, public hearing period is closed. Same process. Further comments or motions? Mr. Sussman, motion to approve. And we got a second from Ms. Lunsky. Seeing no further comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously.
4.3, public hearing on substandard house and garage at 1320 4th Avenue North.
All right, same procedure. Anyone here to speak on 4.3? I'm going to open the public hearing now. We'll close the public hearing. Ms. Collins, if you have something to, you want to add, please.
Yes, Mayor, council members, I'm just going by tradition, what we've always done with the condemnation of the property. And so I did not choose to skip a step. So Mr. Howard Swanson always had me go through an analysis and finding at the public hearing.
Okay.
A second time, because it's serious business with condemning somebody's home and taking it. For proposing to take it down. So we found the two structures to be substandard. These are the findings. Under one, or structures that show more than 35% deterioration with the members, 50% damage, deterioration, non-supporting and closing the walls. The structures are improperly distributed loads upon the floors of the roof covering, or insufficient strength for reasonable safe for the purpose be used. Structures that have been damaged by fire, wind, or other causes that have become dangerous to life, safety, morals, and general health and welfare. Structures have become dilapidated, decayed, unsafe, unsanitary, or which are utterly failed to provide the amenities essential for decent living, that they are unfit for human habitation, or are likely to cause sickness or disease so as to work injury to the health, morals, safety, or general welfare of living there. Parts of this, number 7, parts of the structures that are so attached that they may fall or injure members of the public or property. Structures number 8 that are unsafe, unsanitary, and dangerous to the health, morals, safety, and general welfare. And number 9, structures exist in violation of any of provisions of the building code adopted by the city and or portions of the fire prevention code or other ordinances of the city of Grand Forks. So the summary we came to and the request we're asking is that you would find it substandard to be demolished.
All right. Any questions for Ms. Collins? Are ready to act?
I'll move approval. Staff recommendation.
All right, we got an approval. We got a second from Ms. Osowski. Any further comments? All right, seeing none, all those in favor, thank you. Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Collins. All right, we're gonna move on to action items. I know item 5.1 and 5.2 need to be pulled. Is there any other items that council wishes to be pulled? Further discussion this evening.
5.8.
5.8. All right, Mr. Bean or Mr. Weber, President Sandy, any other items other than 5.1, 5.2, and 5.8? All right.
No, thank you.
All right, we'll be looking at a motion to approve items 5.3, 5.4, 5.5, 5.6, 5.7, 5.9, 5.10, 5.11, 5.12, and 5.13. Get a motion. A motion, Mr. Weigel. We have a second from Ms. Lonsky. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. That motion carries unanimously. So we're on to 5.1, 5.2, and 5.8. So if you want to read that.
5.1 is to set the public hearing and application for tax incentive from the city.
Mayor Buchansky and members of City Council, I want to give you an update on the Epitome Energy project. We do have Dennis Egan's online if there are any questions. We did have the local government advisory committee on May 22nd at 4 p.m. That committee did recommend, there was a general consensus to move forward with the staff recommendation of the preliminary exemption of 15-year at 83% exemption, and to set that public hearing date for July 5th, which would be your first city council meeting in July. The one difference we'll make on this particular application is that instead of dealing with the Grand Forks Public School District, it's in the Manville Public School District. And so when we do go up and visit, because this is a greater than 5-year exemption, we do ask for the concurrence from both the local public school district and also Grand Forks County. And so on this particular application, we will be going to Manville and we'll also be going to Grand Forks County. And we do courtesy visits with the Grand Forks Park District. And so tomorrow evening, I'll be going to the Park District to talk about both of these recommendations at this point in time. Just want to make a highlight on that. As you recall, the land is not tax exemptable, so whatever the value of land is, and I just want to make a note. Currently, right now, the land value of the Epitome Energy site is valued about $60,000, so it brings in taxes of $942. Our preliminary estimate, and this will get final estimate once the project is up and going, We're valuing the land at $4 million. And the other part is the estimated improvement value from Epitome Energy is $175 million of real property. Right now, based upon what Mr. Egan has provided, we're saying this is about a $420 million project, of which about $175 million is related to real estate tax. If you look at year one of this 15-year exemption, the land value tax we're estimating will bring in $62,800, and then that remaining 17% of that will be taxable in year one through year 15. The estimate year one will bring in $467,857. So you can see year one to all the various taxing entities, it will bring in $530,657. So it'll be a significant tax increase even with that 17% coming in on taxes, to include that $4 million that is not exempted regarding the land value. In year 16, on those same numbers, we're estimating whomever's here in year 16, that the land value would be around $72,000 plus, and then the real estate property would be worth $3.1 million. And so that's for a total of just over $3.2 million in taxable value in year 16. So you can see in year 16, this is going to be make quite an impact on all the various taxing entities, to include the Manville Public School District. So with that, Mayor Buchanski, members of the City Council, I recommend that we move forward to the July 5th for a public hearing at City Council under a preliminary recommendation of a 15-year exemption at 83%, and that we will go to both Manville Public School, Grand Forks County, and the Park District regarding this recommendation in the meantime.
All right, so with that, I do want to thank Mr. Egan for being up for the local government advisory committee and answering questions to the other entities. I think that was really important. And thank you for being on here tonight. Is there any other comments, or if council wants to move on that and go towards a public hearing and wait at that point? We can certainly do it either way. So with that, I'd open up to council this time.
I'll move approve.
Got a motion to approve from Mr. Weigel, a second from Mr. Kamami. Well, you might not even get to talk, Mr. Egan, but any other comments? All right.
I think everything's great. I really appreciate your time, and we continue to press forward, and it's been really good working with the city and the EDA. So we appreciate all your time.
All right. Thank you. With that, seeing no further comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously.
5.2, set public hearing on application for tax incentive from Memorial Village 2. Two documents that have revised UND and city follow-up responses and updated third-party cash for this tax.
Okay, Mayor Buchanski, members of City Council, a little more discussion on this particular application. This application did receive a general consensus to move forward in a similar vein to the Epitome Energy project, to move forward with a July 5th public hearing. And the recommendation coming out of that local government advisory committee would be a 90% tax exemption. So it would be 100% for the first 10 years and then 80% in the final 10 years. We'll have more conversations in that regard. Currently, right now, and similar to what I discussed about the Epitome Energy project, right now, this is UND property, so it's not, it has no land value and it's not taxed at all. So the presumption is that this land, both with the mixed-use development and also with the UND's softball complex, will be UND Alumni Association property. I would suspect though the softball complex will get turned over to UND itself at some point in the future, and the mixed-use development will stay with the Alumni Association. Right now, we have that land that would be valued at $1.3 million. And we've estimated the improvement value, not on the total investment. I think what we've seen on the total investment in Memorial Village 2 is in and around 44 million. We're going to, right now, I have an estimated assessed value of around $32 to $33 million when the project is all said and done. So again, doing a similar exercise, just regarding that 100% of 10 years and then 80% on the final 10 years. The year one would provide a land value tax estimate of just over 21,000. There would be no improvement value because you would have 100% exemption. In year 11, With 20% of it being taxable, you would have the land value tax estimated at just over 23,000. You would have the improvement property tax at 118,000 for a total value of 142,000 and change in year 11. And then in year 21, you would have a land value tax estimate of 26,000 with the total improvement value, which would be the 100% of that real estate value, would be 654,000 and change. So the total value would be 680,000 in year 21 for this particular development. In both these projects, if you look at Epitome Energy, we're going to end up with a development agreement with Epitome Energy, and you'll have a development agreement with the Memorial Village 2, Project 2. And we'll have infrastructure development with that greenfield development with Epitome Energy. And in this case, this is an infill development, but there will be, we're going to change a parking lot that's been there a long time. And we're going to have to put some, we're going to have to move some infrastructure, city infrastructure, and we're also going to have to do some renewal of that area. So there will be some infrastructure investments in this infill development. As we go through the particulars, this is also unique. There's this softball complex that I think is seen as the public benefit, not only for UND softball, but for the community. When we were at the local government advisory committee, I think the school district, Grand Forks School District, and also the Park District saw this as a net benefit for them to be able to use this field for high school and other teams, to include the regional high school teams across our region. And to that end, we looked at, if you looked at the Beacon by Epic, that's going to be supported, that public event space by a revenue bond. We first looked at that, and as we go through some of the bullets, if we went in a similar vein, that's just not an applicable way that we can help support this public athletic field in a similar way. So trying to get these projects across the finish line like we always do as the city administration is that we proposed a 3% 20-year loan as a city/JDA loan. Right now, we've moved this loan over to the growth fund because it's a reoccurring where we're going to get paid back in 5996. That's where you just had means on the JDA and growth fund. The other loan of a similar means is Block 5 or Block B, or otherwise known as St. John's redevelopment. The city council, or I guess the JDA at that point, approved a $900,000 loan to help with that particular project. That loan has not been taken out, but we have set aside $900,000. The reason why the JDA did for that particular project, it's a historic project, and there were going to be some additional funds that were going to be required to get that project up and going. The other thing the city, Grand Forks, and our finance department didn't want to do, we didn't really want to sell a revenue bond in that case, and so we did offer up a similar low interest long-term loan finance just to get the project to move forward. That hasn't moved forward, but so we have some precedence on what we've done in this case. I handed out a document right here, which is in front of you, and I just want to go over, hit some of these bullets that we've had. Working with city staff and with Mr. Gosted, Ms. Storstad, Ms. Lazur, and Mr. Brooks, we've had conversations with the Memorial Village development team, and they're here this evening with Steve Burning and Craig Tweeten and Kevin Ritterman. We've had conversations with the University of North Dakota and Carla Mojan Stewart. Here's the VP of Finance Administration. She's here this evening. And we've had conversations with the UND Alumni Association. I see Peter Johnson here this evening. So we've had lots of conversations to try to get this project to move forward. And I just want to go over some of these bullets just to fill in some of the information gaps. The first, we did follow up with the University of North Dakota and just say, is this softball complex really going to cost $4.5 million? And I have looked at the estimate from community contractors, and the estimate currently is $5.2 million. And the intent of UND is to do some value engineering and some design things to get that within that $4.5 million. And how do you make up that $4.5 million? They do have a $2.5 million donor. You saw him about a month or so ago, Mr. Albrecht and his group have agreed to provide $2.5 million to the project. So the $2 million loan would get us to that $4 million project cost. I talked to President Armacost, and there is some urgency with people that want to donate money. They're sometimes not laissez-faire about things. They want action, they want it now, and so there is some urgency to get the project moving forward. Otherwise, sometimes investors' interest wanes in time. So there is some urgency. I talked about UND Alumni Foundation owning land. I think the softball complex, I could see that land being transferred over to UND once the project's up and going. I do not see that with the mixed use development that you've already seen. We've had a lot of conversations regarding UND, and there's this land lease. And Michaela Hewitt is on here also with Baker Tilly. So we're trying to do these pro formas over 20 years. And one of the escapable details that we're still working on is this UND land lease. So essentially with some of these mixed use developments, there's a land lease and there's a payment that goes to UND. So our understanding as part of this pro forma, between $50,000 to $90,000 will be potentially for a land lease that will go to UND housing as part of the mixed use development. So also one of the responses from UND is it could be valued higher than that 90,000. And so that's a to be determined at this point in time. What UND has committed to, at least up front, is that that land lease would be committed to helping the developer pay for this 3% 20-year loan that's valued in and around $133,000. So they would commit that 50 to 90 to help paying the loan. And I think they committed maybe up to the first few to 5 years of that particular loan. So that's a to be determined item, but it's something you ought to know about. UND has asked for this $2 million loan to help the developer and help close this gap. They have asked if we could do a 2% loan. We've kind of held strong on the 3%. Further, they've asked if we could help shape the loan, so an interest only in the first few years while the projects are challenged. We said no to that, so we said if we're going to do a 3% loan, we're going to keep it steady over the 20 years in time. There's been discussion with UND is that they would enter into agreement so that area teams could use the field. So it's just not, we verbally agreed that, schools can unit or the park district, that they're willing to commit to that. We've also brought up the fact that schools are using the Pollard Center for the indoor turf for various activities, and they are intending to redo the track around Memorial Village 2 or Memorial Village 1. So that'll be another great amenity. Maybe there's a way with this loan that we could wrap in some of that community use and memorialize it. So whomever's here, whether it's just city, UND, we have a more firm agreement no matter who's in place. The other thing we've heard from the UND Alumni Association, what we really wanted, we wanted a loan with the UND Alumni Association. So it would be taken from the developer because the developer, to be frank, I don't think they really want to have to pay that loan. And so we did follow up the UND Alumni Association on the loan. And we've also said, is there any way that you can fill the gap of $2 million? And the third to the last bullet provides the fact that, as we well know, UND and the UND Alumni has some large projects from the STEM Center to finishing the Pollard facility to Merrifield Twomley. They've got a lot of cost shares that they need to raise through the Alumni Association, and that $2 million is going to be challenging enough with what they have, and putting anything more is not attainable for them, and that's why they're asking the city support. The final bullet is what they've asked for is I talked about the $2 million softball loan, and what right now we agree on the 100% at the first 10 years. What UND has asked for is if we could move our 80% up to 95% regarding helping the developers in this really tight project. And I think Michaela Hewitt has told you that it's a pretty tight project. We'll come back to some of those things. Under the city of Grand Forks, you should know, and I followed up with Maureen. Right now, our cash on hand, we're earning about 4%. So if we give a 3% loan out, we're on the wrong end of the deal. But we're trying to move the project forward. And this, if we were to go out for a revenue loan on this project, number one, it probably wouldn't pass a bond council test. At this point in time, we couldn't raise the $2 million. And even if we could, likely the interest rate would be upwards of 7%. So that would be at a rate where this project would not move forward without this more subsidized loan. Really, at the end, we're trying to move the project forward, put something in front of you that we can move forward as part of this. Again, I'm just asking for you to set the public hearing. But when we go to the other taxing entities, I want to be able to go with it and recommend what the tax exemption itself we're going to plan for. One of the reasons I would prefer from a city administrative perspective, if you're going to give on the 80% of the back half of the 10 years, I'd rather have you do that than to reduce the city's interest rate on our loan, because number one, we share in the tax exemption with all the various entities, but the loan is all on the city of Grand Forks. That loss of that increment is all in the city of Grand Forks that they're doing that. Michaela and I had a conversation probably an hour or so ago, and we were contemplating, is there any room for the city council to consider? And like, oh, I think this isn't a total science project. There is some qualitative things we can consider. And so she and I had a conversation between that 80% and 95% in the back years. Is there some contemplation of what we could consider? And I would ask her to maybe have a further conversation with you specifically regarding that note. And maybe before I ask her, when I talked to her earlier today, just because I don't think UND knows, and I don't think the developer knows, what is that land lease payment going to look like? They're all estimates, whether it's 50,000, 90,000, or 150,000 that will go to housing. No one's quite sure what that is. And so we talked before this meeting, with all the uncertainty, what may happen 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we don't know what that is. And so we're kind of taking that off. That's really for the developer and UND to work out at some point in the future, because that's volitional for UND to do. And that's something they can have. So instead of us solving all the problems, I think we leave that, having them solve that issue, and we don't have to inject ourselves into it. And I would just ask Michaela just to talk about those last 10 years of this exemption for your further consideration. So with that, Michaela, if you wouldn't mind.
Thank you. Good evening. Just to provide a brief overview of the financial analysis that we prepared as related to this project and the request for a property tax exemption for construction. As Todd outlined very nicely, this project started as a request for a property tax exemption to finance or to assist with construction of the project itself as a mixed use residential and commercial building with underground and surface parking. Related to the project was the financing for the softball complex with an estimated $2 million gap. Exploring bond financing proved to include higher interest rates and debt coverage requirements that made the financials quite challenging. As a result, the method of financing was recommended to be a loan from the city to the developer with structured level repayment over a 20-year period that would essentially be using available cash flow from the project. The annual property tax exemption, as requested by the developer, is necessary to provide for sufficient cash flow to meet minimum financing requirements of both debt and equity that would allow the project to proceed as proposed. Repayment of the city's $2 million loan with estimated annual payments of about $134,000, assuming a 3% interest rate, would further burden the project cash flow and financial returns of the project that requires additional assistance, either through a forgiveness of annual lease payments and the property tax exemption. So as with our review of the project and understanding the annual projected revenues, operating expenses, estimated debt service payments, and including the estimated loan payments, our recommendation was 100% property tax exemption for the first 10 years. The annual returns to the developer and debt coverage requirements are on the low range of reasonable, even with the 100% property tax exemption, which is why there was also some consideration of an annual land lease forgiveness until the project is stabilized. In analyzing the project and the recommendation for the last 10 years of the project, what that exemption was. Within the memo, we had initially recommended an 80% exemption, so it's an effective 90% blended property tax exemption over the full 20-year period. However, in analyzing the project financials and the ability of the cash flow to be able to support repayment of the city's loan over the last 10 years, and with some uncertainty regarding what the actual cash flow and land lease payments were or will be, our request would be to consider up to a blended 95% exemption, and that would include, again, the 100% for the first 10 years as the project is stabilizing and growing, and then 90% over the last 10 years, again, to be able to repay the $2 million loan at the 3% interest rate, as opposed to reducing the interest rate or deferring some of the early years payment on the loan. So again, the recommendation is based on the financials of the project. There is a need for property tax exemption with a consideration of up to 95% blended based on the cash flow of the project and the projected returns and requirements of repaying the city's loan.
Without Mayor Buczynski, if I could also ask, obviously this loan, I've asked Mr. Costa to come up here. Obviously, we're not proposing a revenue bond like we did with Beacon by Epic, but how we would secure the loan in a similar fashion if we had financed it in another way.
Sure. City Council, like Mr. Phelan talked about, we've done this before in the Block 5 transaction. We would obviously have a promissory note executed by the debtor. Right now, it's the debtor would be the developer. There would also be a mortgage on the land. The land is, as I understand it, to be owned by the foundation, so they'd have to enter an agreement to allow for the mortgage to be secured by the land, which would include softball then. Then there'd also be what I would call a leasehold mortgage or security agreement, where we take a security interest in the building. Because the building would be on a long-term land lease. We want to secure up that building as well. And I'd also recommend guarantees be executed, which we did. We obtained guarantees in the Beacon transaction with the revenue bond. If there was a shortfall in revenue, those guarantees were as a backstop as well. So that would be what we'd be proposing. Of course, that would involve the foundation and developer in all those agreements, but trying to get in a position where we'd be secure. Bear in mind, you're not going to be in a first position because they're going to have their primary financing with respect to the construction, which would be probably in a first position with respect to the building at least. But it puts us in a position to at least have some security interest and some ability to secure the repayment of that $2 million loan with a 20-year period. So I'd be more than happy to answer any questions regarding that matter.
Any questions from Mr. Gosta? You're confident that the loan will be secured and it will get repaid?
It'll be secured with respect to and I'm very confident that
If it goes forward.
with the documentation we have, it'll put us in a position that do the best we can to try to secure the repayment of that note.
With that, Mayor Buczynski, I think that's the end of our presentation. We stand for any questions.
Sounds good. I suppose I can give my thoughts first, if council's okay with that. Well, I'll tell you what I like about the project. First of all, adding a community asset that the rest of the community can use is phenomenal. And you know, you got a donation coming from outside the community that's going to be out of this community, $2.5 million. I think that's pretty great as well. And most importantly, to me, is pulling a property that was, you know, currently a publicly owned property. The land wasn't paying anything, so that's unique to the other TIF projects or pilot projects that we've looked at. Is the land had some value prior to the TIF project. In this case, it has no value. You know, the loan is interesting. I think it's you know, had that Block B project move forward, we had that 900,000, I think it would be a lot, or already out the door, I think it would be a lot tighter. Do you know what the interest rate was that proposed for that? It was different. I think it was at 2% at the time.
I think it was Mayor, I think it was 20 years at 2%.
So, you know, interest rates have definitely, you know, changed since then. I do think that, you know, the loan is a challenge. We've got a lot of projects that are coming up that we need to look at. I guess my question is pretty simple for Michaela. I mean, this is a but-for test thing. You know, this moving around, I mean, we need to know as a council, what is the but-for number, but for this, and then we can decide if this is, you know, sort of bouncing around. I think we're not doing it the way it was meant to be done. So I guess, Michaela, I'm gonna kick it back to you and you tell us exactly what you've been hired to do. Tell us, but for this, would the project go forward or not? What's that number?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, regarding the but-for test, we look at it in two pieces. One, but for the property tax exemption, would the project as proposed or proceed as proposed? The answer to that is no. When looking at the main financial metrics being the debt coverage ratio, so the ability of the revenues to cover the first mortgage, without the property tax exemption, the annual cash flow is less than 1 times, meaning that the project was not able to support repayment of the debt and would need a lesser amount. Similarly, with the annual cash flow without the exemption would provide very low developer returns, meaning there would be significant other funding that would be required for the project, not requiring repayment either through debt or equity investor returns. So with assistance, with the assistance, the first part of the question, the property tax exemption provides that cash flow savings that allows the developer to be able to obtain financing, meet the minimum debt coverage requirements, and still on the low range of the equity returns is able to start generating a little bit more reasonable market returns. That would be for at least the first 5 to 10 years is why we're recommending 100% tax exemption. When considering the options for the entire 20-year return of the project, looking at the project cumulatively, the projected returns are still on the very low range of what would be considered reasonable based on the current assumptions that have been used. And providing that cash flow exemption through the last 10 years for the cumulative 20 years does provide that cash flow that's necessary to both repay the developer's private financing, provide modest to reasonable returns on their equity investment, and also provide sufficient cash flow to be able to repay the city's loan as suggested at the 3% interest rate and not reduced down to 2%. The only variable that is still unknown is what the land, the actual land lease payments will be, as Mr. Phelan had suggested. And by providing a recommendation of up to 95%, still provides some latitude and understanding what that actual lease rate would be, and then what the ultimate recommended exemption would be based on that additional cash flow need.
So all else equal is your recommendation at a blended 95%, yes or no?
Yeah, up to a 95%, correct.
Okay, here's what I would propose, and maybe this can kind of make everybody happy. If we've got a 95% blended, why don't we go to 95% in years 1 through 10, 95% in years 11 through 20? We take our $2 million loan and we drop it down to 2% for the first 10 years, because we're already gonna have a loan that we're gonna give out. After the first 10 years, once cash flows are better, that loan goes up to 4%. So now you've got effectively the same thing, but it allows for us to get something on the property tax side, a little bit lower on the loan side. And the land lease, the university needs to figure out a deal to get that done and help the first 10 years. You follow me, Michaela?
I do.
What do you think about that?
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah. Sandy,
I'm
please.
sorry, I thought you were asking the council. If you're asking Michaela what she feels about that, I'm happy to defer to her.
Yeah, I'll ask her first then. Yeah, you're okay with that, yeah?
I think we could, Mr. Mayor, Council, I think we could run the analysis to see how much of a differential that is, but I think it would probably be pretty close to what the cash flow looks like now based on the current structure.
Yeah, with the difference that our other entities will get a little bit more early on, which I think would make them happy. All right,
Mr. Mayor?
Please, President Sam.
Analysis without the softball diamond.
Michaela, I think the question is, what would be the tax exemption if we didn't even consider the loan to the softball? What would be your rough recommendation on that?
Without the land payment, or without the loan included in the cash flow, we're still, because of what the actual land lease would be, there's still a little bit of unknown of what that recommended amount would be. There would still certainly be a need for assistance. But if we were to assume similar land leases and based on similar land lease payment assumptions and what the terms of the loan would be, we would be closer to an 80% exemption.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Mr. Mayor, just in general, my general thoughts are I appreciate your compromise. That sounds like a great way to get some revenue for the school districts and the taxing entities right away. The loan, as Mr. Phelan mentioned, he wasn't excited about changing the terms of the loan. I'm really not that excited about changing the terms of the loan, especially when that ball field isn't going to be taxable, right? The city won't be collecting any property taxes on it. So us taking considerable risk, financial risk by reducing the terms of the loan. So the request to reduce to 2% over the entire 20 years, I'm not excited about. I did think, or I had a similar thought, perhaps we could tie them to a variable rate, but your 2% and 4% sound good to me. I guess ultimately my question goes back to Mr. Phelan. He had mentioned earlier that we were going to be, through the loan documents, we're going to be codifying the public's ability to use the softball diamond and the Pollard turf. Can you explain to me how we're going to do that, Todd, when our loan is not with UND, our loan is with the developer, correct?
Council President Sandy, I think as Mr. Glass had said, I think you'll also have the UND Alumni Association tied to the agreement. And I think as part of you finalizing anything, that whether it's part of that, you'd want to make sure you vetted agreement on the use of the softball complex. I have brought up to UND the Pollard Center and the proposed new track. I think they're contemplating that because it's not really tied to this loan, but I think they're willing and engaged to talk about that. And what I talked to them, Council President Sandy, is that, you know, we're going through this exercise about what kind of turf facilities and courts and aquatics that we need in our community. And we know that UND needs us to take some actions on the aquatics so that they can move forward with some of their HISLOP moves. And I think they're interested, and I said, well, we're interested in making sure we right size all of our facilities so that if there are other facilities that we could use that would reduce the scale and scope of what we're trying to move forward, that's what we're interested in. And this is the only time we really have a hook to really have a conversation about it. So I think it'd be tied to it, but it'd be a separate use agreement, and would also intertwine some of our local government governments that are the ones that are really going to enjoy the use of these facilities.
Thank you, Mr. Phelan. I very much appreciate that. And I do certainly like the idea of codifying the concepts so that there is no misunderstanding between us in the future. I just want to make sure that everybody's well informed of what everyone's intention and desires are. And with that in mind, I guess I'd make the mayor's recommendation of 95% over the 20 years, 2% loan for 10 years, 4% for the last 10.
We got a motion in a second. We got a motion, President Sandy, second from Mr. Weigel.
Make a quick comment.
And this is what we're going to set as the framework for the public hearings. That's essentially what the motion would be. Okay.
This is your preliminary recommendation that'll get us to the tax exemption. So when we discuss it with the other taxing entities, That's what we're getting, that's what we're doing to get to the 95% tax exemption.
All right, Mr. Lyle, you had a comment, please.
I just want to add a couple of things. I think we talk about the facilities, the turf, the Fritz Pollard Center, as well as the new softball complex. The UND's been allowing different community groups to use that Fritz Pollard Center all year long. I've seen soccer in it, I've seen lacrosse in it, and I've seen youth football. So I think the framework is already there for multiple entities to work together to utilize the facility. I think the same thing's going to happen when it comes to softball. Right now, there is no facility like that in Grand Forks. I think it expands the opportunities to hold major tournaments here in Grand Forks. We're fighting for an $80 million indoor turf facility as an option for the youth and for our community to bring some of these things. I think this adds to it, but yet somebody's willing to pay for nearly 50% of it or over 50% of it. So I think a $2 million loan at a good interest rate, I think it just gets another project done. And I think it's positive for the community.
Thank you, Mr. Weigel.
Mayor?
Yeah, Mr. Green, please.
Yeah, I just want to add on to that too. I mean, I'm very impressed with this development and how this, in general, the entire area out there has been redeveloped with the Pollard Center, what we would do on this, the village, the housing, and what they're planning for track and all of that. It's going to make for, I think, impressively look at what UND's facilities are just growing and being better. So I like the idea, Mayor. I think your idea of the packaging of the loan and the like makes sense to me. So I just want to tell everybody, I'm in support of what you guys are talking about. I'll still want to talk to Mr. Peepers maybe about how they're addressing the parking, but in general, this looks like a great path forward.
Mayor, which is, I think, the important part of the agreement, I think we agree with Councilmember Weigel, is that we have an administration that is really allowing the community to use those facilities. So we should memorialize that as we know leadership changes and sometimes mindsets change. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to memorialize all those things.
Absolutely, that could be a really good one for the community too, to have, a celebratory type of memo, memorialization, whatever you want to call it. All right, any further comments? Item 5.2. So the motion would be to set the date as July 5th. And we've got the motion in those set terms. So with that, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. You 5.8 now, Ms. Thorstad.
5.8, small cell agreement with Verizon Project 7932.
All right, Ms. Oselski, do you have any further comments on this?
I just want to make sure that we're going to run our own radiation tests on these and try to get some numbers on what kind of radiation they put out once they're off.
Do we have a Geiger? Is it a Geiger? What test?
I don't
radiation?
really
Is that
know,
something that we
but
have within environmental
You
health?
should be able to.
Yeah, that's something, if we want to, we can start doing some research as to, the testing equipment and whether we have any capacity, ourselves as an organization, or if we need to bring somebody else in to do some of that, but we can look into that and bring some more information back on that.
Yeah, I asked that a couple weeks ago though, and I still don't have any additional information. So I just want to make sure that that is done, is all I want. I just don't want to take Verizon's word for it that this is safe. I think that we've all learned a lot of lessons in the past couple of years that we just can't go along with what they say. So I just want to make sure that that's direction that we can go once these get put out.
We'll work on getting a report back on that.
Yeah, I guess at this time, I don't know how we would do we, other than a motion that we're setting that, I think it'd just be something they have to come back with saying, here's how we plan to do it. And if we have to bring something back later, we could, but.
Surely there's some sort of national standard that we can.
These now have been.
Is there something that we can subscribe to some sort of process? Or?
Well, all the equipment and material is all basically vetted through the FCC and the various federal organizations. So we have, all that's going to be in compliance with all
those regulatory features. I think the question is, do we want to do our own independent monitoring at the site? That's not something that would, is part of that normal equipment. It'd be a separate monitoring process that we'd have to talk about how often we want to do it and, the degree and the frequency and the reporting kind of activity. So I don't know what that ends up involving at this point.
But we likely don't have the equipment currently, so we need to have some.
I'm going to assume that we don't, but I can't say that we're in an area of technology and expertise that I'm not familiar with.
Can we, Ms. Osowski, can we get something back to you? Probably, what's a good time frame to have a better answer?
I mean, even if we could just get a quote on hiring an independent, that's probably more cost effective than trying to buy the equipment and own it and learn how to operate it. And I feel like there's somebody out there that tests these that we can ping.
Are you looking for ongoing testing or just once it's installed?
I just want to, once in a while, go test to make sure that these things are within the guidelines that the FCC set up. And I just really think it's time that us as a community start taking some responsibility about what is being put up and what is being forced, and just kind of doing a little bit more of our own research. And if it comes back, every single time that they're within compliance, at least we can say we did our job and we made sure that our citizens are safe. I mean, that Verizon lady wasn't even able to answer if the frequencies could be turned up remotely or anything. She barely answered any of my questions besides we're in compliance with the FCC. And that just isn't a good enough answer for me. So I did ask a couple weeks ago if we could go about this. I received nothing, and
Excuse me.
Todd to save the day.
Mayor Buczynski, I did have some quick follow-up with our public health department and with Javen, and that would likely be the group.
Right.
And so what I'll do is I'll ask him as part of the next week's committee of the whole working, have him come back just to engage in that conversation about how we could do it. What would require, at least we'll get that conversation going and get some feedback from US City Council.
I kind of find it hard to believe that no one in the city is able to test radiation levels. I mean, don't they keep track of that at all, True, or anything with their x-ray machines, or there has to be a way.
Yes.
So
We're, Council Member Osowski, we'll come back with some thoughts and ways forward. I think what you're saying is that we have national standards.
Correct.
And what you're asking for is a local strategy just to further ensure to our citizens that they're within those limits. Just like we have on our own, we have lots of federal standards we have to meet, but we have to prove it. And so you want that from a local.
I do. I think it's time that we just start taking a little bit more responsibility as a community of a whole, and not just going about what they say is right. So, or safe, or safe.
Bring it back. We'll start a conversation next week.
Okay, thank you.
All right, got a motion to approve. Do we have a second? Second. So motion from Mr. Wyatt, second from Mr. Kavami. All those in favor, signify. Any further comment on the item? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-1 with Osowski dissenting. All right, we'll move on to 6 information items.
6.1, statement of changes in cash balance as of April 30th.
All right, thank you. Item 7.
7.1, the vendor list and engineer's estimate as is attached.
All right, you got a motion to approve. You got a motion to approve, Mr. Kavami, second from Ms. Lunsky. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. On to 8, city administrator comments, Mr. Gill.
Mayor Buczynski, I just wanted to give a thanks to Councilmember Weigel. All those years you've been here, and we had those 2 dueling options: the 42nd Demers underpass versus the I-29 interchange versus the bridge. And you always stress the importance that had to be the 1A project over all these years that I've been city administrator and you've been in the city council. So I just wanted to, as the mayor said, a really big day, and you really pressed the importance of that over the years and keeping that our 1A project. So I just wanted to give you a word of thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phelan. We'll move on to 9 mayor and council member comments. So after that, great words from Mr. Phelan. Mr. Weigel, any comments this evening?
I never thought I'd see the day personally. I thought I'd ride off to the sun, into the sunset off the council, and eventually when I was 80, we'd get that thing taken care of. But just thanks to everybody. The city staff, they did a great job, and putting everybody together to get something done. So really happy to see that, and I'm excited to, in a couple of years, to be able to roll underneath that train track or over the top of the train track and not wait there for 25 minutes. So,
I'm
just thanks
assuming
for
you're
everybody.
talking about using the roadway underneath the train.
Whatever works.
All right, sounds good. Thank you for that, Mr. Weigel. Ms. Osowski?
I guess my first question is to Mr. Bean. I was wondering if you ever started working on the after summary review about movement, Mr. Bean.
Yeah, Mayor Osowski, I have been working on that, doing a fair amount of research, understanding what that clear purpose might be, what we look at for an organizational structure to oversee it, facilitation options. There'll be costs and some timelines to do it, and recognize the importance of all of our leadership in doing that. So I know it's been several months since we last talked about it, but it's super critical, I think, to do this right and make sure we get everybody on board with it. So obviously today I'm not prepared to make a presentation what I've seen so far, but I would gladly do that at a future meeting if that would work, and I guess have further discussion and have it be on an agenda.
I guess I would like to see that personally.
Well, I think it's important to note there doesn't need to be council action for Mr. Dean to move forward with an after action report. He doesn't need council approval to do that at all. He can continue down that process. The only thing is if he's going to expend city funds, then that would need to come before this council. So there's nothing holding him back from continuing to do that work. It doesn't require a vote from us. He's certainly willing to continue.
I guess that's really all I have for today. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Osowski. Mr. Weber, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. No comments tonight, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Oh, I even pulled you out of order. I'm going to do you last, but all right, you're second last. Ms. Lunsky, comments this evening?
I just wanted to invite everyone to the children's remodel at the library. Their grand opening was last Saturday. So I invite everyone to go to the public library and check it out.
Thank you, Ms. Lunsky. Mr. Cavani, comments this evening?
Yeah, same thing. We spent an hour and a half in the library on Saturday. It was amazing. The designers, staff, everyone, amazing job. The kids loved it.
All right, Mr. Bean, any comments this evening?
Yeah, I'd maybe just to add on a little bit to the after action review. I'm certainly not in the capacity to be able to lead something like that. I think it's going to have city leadership in trying to do so, and I gladly reach out to you and others and have more discussion on something like that. If it's going to be successful, you got to do it right, and that would be what I would love to pursue and see if we can get that accomplished. So I'll continue to have that conversation internally and then bring it forth when the time comes.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bean. President Sandy, any comments this evening?
Mr. Mayor, a couple things. First of all, I think the people after action review really are only looking for a pound of flesh. I don't think they're actually interested in spending time to make our community better. I believe that I lived through it, you lived through it. Most of us that lived through it know we got caught in a geopolitical firestorm, and so it didn't work out. Fortunately, we had our development agreement in place, which I believe took care of our issues. So that's my opinion. I'm not interested in doing a formal after action review, but if the council wants to do that, they're welcome to. I do want to thank the council for supporting the changes to the public comments. And I appreciate the unanimous vote on that as part of the consent agenda. I do think tonight's example, tonight's public comments were a perfect example of why we should continuously be evaluating our public comment policies and potentially making changes if necessary. Mayor, I understand that you get put in a very difficult position, but if I had been the officiating officer tonight and Ms. Spicer had been speaking about your wife, I would have ended her time. And I believe that our new policy will allow the officiating officer to do that, because people use our family members against us. The only reason that Miss Spicer was bringing up my wife is because she was simply trying to hurt me and make me look bad. And she certainly spent her time getting on the record with information that wasn't factual, right? But it's already on the record. It becomes part of the record, and there's not much we can do unless we, of course, decide we want to sue her, which, I mean, if you think about that whole concept, it's virtually impossible. Anyway, it's very frustrating for me when people feel like they can stand up and say anything they want without retribution. For example, Mr. Beauclair, he still never admitted that he called us, he said that we sexually harassed Ms. Mock and Katie Dockler. Neither of them have mentioned it, but Sean Beauclair specifically said that he talked to, I can't remember if it was his daughter or his niece or whomever, someone at another law firm, and they confirmed what he was saying, when we know in fact that that was a lie. And it was corroborated by his family member. No matter how many times Craig Spicer says, I didn't challenge the mayor to a fight. Mayor, we were there with about 50 people. He asked you to go outside and fight. And when Ms. Carlson gets up and accuses our chief of police of nefarious actions and dereliction of duty related to a graphic rape that she describes, when we find out afterwards, the fact of that rape, it didn't occur in Grand Forks. It wasn't even from our county. Yet she gets to stand up and overtly lie and fabricate stories. I believe that the new rules that we put in place hopefully will help with some of these things. But from now on, I'm going to start calling people out. I disagree with allowing people to get up and slander others when they know it's a lie. It just frustrates me. Anyway, I appreciate everyone's support on the changes tonight. Thanks, Mayor.
Yep, thank you. And, as to tonight with us talking about it, it was certainly, very borderline and made me uncomfortable. I think we've really drawn a hard line when it comes to, other people's children's. And then, when people are allowed to speak, you don't have to tell the truth. As part of the First Amendment, you can go out there and we're in a difficult spot because we can be slandered as public officials in a lot of ways, which is unfortunate. So I don't know the easy answer to that. I do expect that, the temperature to continue to be lowered because there's no value in it, as Mr. Borky said. There just isn't value in a lot of some of the personal attacks. So I would continue to plead for that to be. Yeah, Mr. Sandy, if you have something else, please.
That's, Mayor, with all due respect, borderline.
Well,
she wasn't talking about me. She was talking about someone that's not an elected official in our community. That's not borderline, that's overt.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you and us talking about it. I guess that borderline was up. I was debating at which point to step in there, and I apologize because I understand that, the way you felt on that front, and it was a decision that I had to make in the moment. So hope you understand that. All right, with that, I think this just goes to exemplify, how tough these jobs are. This causes a lot of tension to people that come up here every day, try to do the best we can for the city. And we've worked really extremely hard, and then you have people that want to come and tear you down. I mean, that's that's just the national dialogue right now, and it's disgusting, quite frankly. We need to stick to the facts. We need to stick to what matters. We need to stick to ideas, not attacking people. And I got nothing else today. It's been a long day, long time on the sun of the suit, and I'm ready to go home. So I'd look for a motion to adjourn. Got a motion from Ms. Wasowski, second from Ms. Lunsky. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Both same side. We are adjourned.